Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A very warm welcome to you. I'm your host, Siobhan A Riordan. This is Silver Tent TV, and this is the Women of Wisdom show. The Silver Tent is a global platform for women over 50. It's a place for women to come and be supported and nurtured in pursuing those dreams that are yet to come true. And it's also a place where we, by the very fact that we're over 50, 60, 70, 80, 90s, we've been around the block a few times and we've learned a few things. And so Women of Wisdom shows about giving you opportunity to access some of that wisdom. And I'm delighted to join Cassandra Eve here today. A very warm welcome to you, Cassandra.
Oh, thank you, Siobhan. It's really good to be here and just have a chat about women's wisdom and how that unfolds in our lives.
Absolutely. And I love the diversity of wisdom. You know, sometimes I'm doing interviews about being sugar-free. I'm doing interviews about preparing for end of life. And today we're going to be looking at astrology, at the kind of esoteric side of women's wisdom. And you've got a wonderful depth of experience to share with us, Cassandra.
Oh, thank you. I really look forward to seeing how it all unfolds in our sharing.
So let's tell people a little bit about you. Tell me a kind of short story of the background that's led to where you are now, which is you're an astrologer, you're a writer, you're a retreat facilitator, and building that expertise over decades.
Okay, well, one thing is I've come full circle in the space that I live, in that I was born in Cornwall, lived here till I was 6, and now I've come home in that sense. It's an amazing place to live. And in those intervening years between the age of 6 and moving back here 6 years ago, actually, I journeyed all around the world. I really had a bit of a gypsy life. Took me to boarding school in my teens. But the main point that I really, the key point in the whole journey would have been in the late 1980s when everything in my life fell apart. It all went. And I realized that the common denominator was me. And whereas I'd been looking out there for life, for love, for a sense of myself, I suddenly realized, because it was empty, there's a world inside that I haven't even begun to look at. And that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, what actually happened was I had a serendipitous meeting with a woman in a cafe. We just got chatting, and she happened to be an astrologer. And she said to me, come along to the local astrology club, we'll create your chart, because I'd shared a bit about what was happening in my life. And, have a look, it might help you. So I went, and I'd always had an interest in astrology, but I'd kind of discounted it because I used to read about sun sign Capricorn, and I am a Capricorn with my sun sign. And I used to feel it's one aspect of who I am, but it's not the whole picture. When I had my birth chart created, I realized why it wasn't the whole picture, because long story short, we're all a mix of all 12 signs in different ratios. And I'm actually a very watery, earthy Capricorn. I have a lot of water signs with my earthy Capricorn, which gives me a level of sensitivity that was really opening up at that time, and that I needed to come to terms with. And I needed to look at and explore, as many of us get to this point, why I'd come to this point where everything fell apart. So from that point onwards, there was a discovery on an inner level, and I suppose you could say a rebuilding that started to happen, but a rebuilding from the inside out, from the core of self-discovery, of allowing life to lead me. And very quickly, spiritual teacher came into my life within about a year. That was, I started to train in astrology. I took on a volunteer role in a rape and incest crisis line. And all these were threads that I needed to kind of gather up to weave together to create the woman I am now. So that's long story short.
And yeah, beautifully, in a lovely place to pause, because people often think of astrology as a divination tool, but really it's a tool. I call it a map of the personality, a map of the soul. And it's what, when you get that whole picture, it can really bring insight into who you are and what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I describe it to clients as an energy map. You know, we're receiving all the time the energy of our solar system and the universe. But like we're walking through all these different frequencies of energy, you know, mobile phone signals, electromagnetics, or all of those kind of invisible influences on our system, astrology works in a similar way. So it's not predictive in terms of circumstances or events, not in my view anyway,
Yeah.
but predictive in terms of energy rhythms. And for me, that's what's important, because the whole of life is energy. And when we go into that core of the energy behind the forms, you know, behind the events, behind the things that appear in our life, we're kind of getting more into the truth of what is happening and what our response can be, rather than what our reaction is.
That's a great way of seeing astrology as energy. And I think energy has also been a kind of running theme through your life as you've explored the esoteric.
Yeah, absolutely it is, because at that wake-up point in the late 1980s, I'd been living a kind of normal, whatever that means, traditional life, you know, go to work. I was a civil servant, I was in a partnership, we had a mortgage, you know, I had a child. And then suddenly everything, all of that just literally, it just was decimated, you know, it just fell apart. And that journey to look at the inner realm unfolded. And that started with exploring the psychology, if you like, the makeup of who this woman is. And particularly that came about through my volunteer work with the rape and incest crisis line, because until I started to wake up and to uncover some memories that I hadn't consciously had until that crisis point, I didn't realize how I was operating from patterning and conditioning that was reactive rather than creative. And actually, I'm just realizing now, and this is what amazes me, how this happens, that reactive and creative have got the same letters.
It's just
pretty much, but just in a different way of different order. And so, you know, the movement was from being the reaction to what was happening to being the source of what's happening, to being the creative energy of what's happening. And I never went looking for the esoteric or the spiritual, but as I said, you know, very quickly a spiritual teacher turned up and I recognized him. And that was my sensitivity opening up and kind of shouting at me and saying, here's a path, you know, here's a direction. And because everything had fallen apart, I was looking for a direction, not necessarily a spiritual one. And I just followed that intuitive flow. And as I followed it, everything just opened up very naturally and effortlessly.
Because you lived in that spiritual community for 15 years or 18 years?
Well, I lived in the first one I was in, I lived for 7 years. And then I then, after that period, I was in partnership. And although I was still connected to the teacher, I gradually was moving away. And then I met another teacher who I'd heard about through friends for many years, a realized master. And people kept saying to me, oh, you must come meet this guy, you must come, you know, he's the bee's knee, he's the business. And I'm like, nah, not interested. And then very serendipitously, as has often been the case in my life, we met. And again, there was this, it was like a thunderbolt, this recognition of, oh my goodness, here is somebody who speaks my language. You know, it's like my experience was directly, this man is speaking my heart. You know, he's speaking what I know to be true in the depth of myself. And I was very, very attracted. And within, I don't know, less than a year, I was living in community in the UK. After 2 or 3 years, we also set up a community in New Zealand. And I was very involved in that, teaching the meditation practice that was part of that community, teaching and living in New Zealand until 2012. We had a lot of nationalities within the community, so it was a real melting pot of growth, you know, on every level.
And because it's that whole experience of community that you carry into your retreats. So, and I engage with communities and involved in community development in lots of different ways. And it's not easy, is it, Cassandra?
No, it's not easy. And, you know, one of the core principles, I think, with community is to have that set of shared values. So clearly the community I was in, we'd all been drawn by this particular spiritual teaching. So that was the core value. But then, you know, the community I lived in was also very mainstream in a way, because between us, though, you know, it was a fluid community of about 12 or 13 core members over the 13 years I was in it. But then we always had visitors, and those core members, we had 8 children between us, you know, so get the children to school, all that kind of thing. There was also business, because the spiritual teaching was about living your creativity to your fullest potential. So when a cafe in New Zealand that was just down the road from our community came up for sale, somebody said, should we buy it? You know, no experience or any, but that's what happened. And we created, through the expertise of a woman who was in the community, who was a chocolatier, we created this amazing chocolaterie restaurant with beautiful gardens. And so there was all these different balls to juggle and hold, as well as that process of the intensity of being in intimate relationship with a group of people from so many different cultures and backgrounds. I mean, it was incredible. I wouldn't have missed it for anything, but it wasn't easy.
Mm. And so what would you say are the magical elements of that people can experience in your retreats?
The holding space. So, you know, I've been through some really deep traumatic experiences as a woman and healed them, you know, evolved beyond them. And so I hold that presence in the space of retreat. I hold it in my life, actually. And so that depth of experience and wisdom and healing and transformation is available within the group space. We create a group field together, and the women who come also bring their wisdom and experience. So it's not about me. It's a fine line, because I'm holding space, but it's also the group field, yeah, that we create together. So what tends to happen, and I trust this implicitly, is that life brings to me and brings me to those who come the very things we need. It's like there's a natural synergy that happens where we can dive together into the deepest experiences of what it means to be a woman, and to heal them, resolve them. And truly, you know, the journey is about learning to love oneself and to embody the divine feminine that we are at the core.
And you've got a retreat happening in beautiful Cornwall in October, and then one scheduled for May next year in Greece.
Yes, yes, I do. So Greece, I've been holding retreats there for a few years now, in a beautiful retreat centre, and they do tend to be longer retreats. So they're 8-9 days usually. And last year's didn't happen because of, you know, obvious reasons, but they are such a deep immersion, because the island of Crete holds that really deep earthy, feminine wisdom, and the people are so warm and welcoming. They still have their strong connection to the land and to Mother Nature, and that, as well as obviously the space of the retreat holding, there's a space where we're held by the retreat center, and we're also held by the energy of Crete herself, which is so amazing.
Because our Aphrodite's bath is there, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't
Yeah, I think
know
it
about
is.
that.
Yeah,
I'll have to explore that
yeah.
one.
Another kind of aspect of that feminine
Yes,
quality that
absolutely,
Crete is.
absolutely, yeah.
And
And
I know a lot of the wisdom you've put together in your book, Sacred Pathways, Discovering Divine Archetypes. And it's, got masses of 5-star reviews on Amazon. And I'm assuming you're drawing on a lot of that wisdom in your retreats and online courses.
yes,
Tell us a little bit
absolutely.
about that book.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite
Yeah.
get that.
I was just saying, tell us a little bit about the book.
Okay.
Background reading that people can do before coming on your retreat.
Yeah, absolutely it is, because the book is based on astrology. So the archetypes are actually physical bodies in the solar system, and the archetypes are patterns that we all dip into at different times of our lives. And when you look at history, it is his story. So my aim with the book was to present her story, hence the feminine archetypes, the Greek gods, goddesses. And they are templates for us to remember who we are and what women's wisdom is. So the book is based on astrology, mythology, and women's wisdom. I've collaborated also with a female artist who's created the most beautiful illustrations for the archetypes. And the book acts as a point of remembering, because when I talk about them in client sessions or on retreats, because all the retreats are based on one or two of the archetypes, women remember them. It's like we know them. It's like they're in the cells of our soul almost, that we remember what it is to be the warrior of wisdom, or we remember what it is to be the earth mother, the one who's connected to all the cycles of the season, not just spring and summer of growth and endless expansion, but the letting go of autumn, the rest of winter, and the renewal that comes when we embrace the full cycle. So yeah, the book points us towards that ancient knowing that is there already in us, and it's just simply a pointer to remember that in yourself and to bring that to life in your life. And for me, that is women's wisdom, is the living of it.
And I'm so glad that you talked about her story as well, because God has been a man for thousands of years, but was female for millions of years.
Yeah,
And it's really great to hear that part of your retreat is reclaiming that history.
absolutely is. It's looking at what has been forgotten and also what has been denied and suppressed. And obviously, women have played their part in that too. It's not just all down to the men, but it is about bringing that back so that we can come to balance. And if we look at gender nowadays, who knows where we're going, because actually we are masculine and feminine on an inner level. And the age of Aquarius that we're moving into now is the age of the human being. It's kind of non-gendered, but nonetheless, it doesn't mean to say that we can't fully be our gender, whatever that is.
Wonderful. A perfect place to finish, I think, Cassandra.
Yeah.
We'll put all the information in the text with this, but it's been lovely to connect with you. And thank you so much. And thank you for coming and sharing your incredible story of transformation, I think.
Well, thank you, Siobhan. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wherever you are in the world, if the sun isn't shining in your skies, may it shine in your heart. This is Siobhan signing out.